In this edition of Believers Talk, we bring in a very special guest to talk about a very unique Hall of Famer. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Believers Talk. My name is Joe, and welcome to another Hall of Fame edition of Believers Talk, where we spend this off season talking about the Buffalo Bills Hall of Famers. In this episode, we are going to talk about Buffalo Bills Hall of Famer Bill Polian. Before we do that, guys, if you are new to this channel, guys, my name is Joe. I am the host. If you are new to this channel, guys, hit that subscribe button for continual Buffalo sports content. Of course, we have your update on the Buffalo Bills season just around the corner. Keep you up to date on the Sabres, the Bulls, and the Bisons as well, and all things Buffalo sports. So hit that subscribe button. After you hit that subscribe button, you want to hit that notification bell. YouTube will notify you when we put out new content. Like this video and leave a comment. Tell me what you think about Bill Polian. Now, I am fortunate enough to be joined in this episode by Paul from Hashtag Sports. So he'll be joining us in a second to talk about what he loved about Bill Polian, why Bill Polian is his favorite Buffalo Bills Hall of Famer. Before we do that, I just wanted to talk about some of Bill Polian's success, right? Lots of success for Bill Polian. Some of you, even the newer fans, will know who Bill Polian is because you've seen or heard him on ESPN Radio or on ESPN Live. Maybe you've seen some of his most recent work trying to start a new football league in the AAF. Now, sure, that did not work, but as Paul will talk about, there are very few things that did not work once Bill Polian got hold of them. So in Bill Polian's career, he spent 32 seasons in one way or another contributing to the NFL. A lot of that time was spent as GM of our Buffalo Bills. During his time in the NFL as a GM, he went to 5 Super Bowls. You talk about 4 of them with the three of them with the Buffalo Bills. He was not there for our last one with the Carolina Panthers and one with the Indianapolis Colts, where he becomes the only person that is in the Hall of Fame that was a part of the Buffalo Bills to have a Super Bowl ring. So 5 Super Bowls, 13 division titles. So definitely a GM that belongs in the Hall of Fame, right? He's definitely a GM and really just an NFL contributor who definitely has earned his name in the Hall of Fame, and that's why he was inducted into the Hall of Fame for all those attributes. Someone who definitely went through the whole gamut, right? Went through the whole gamut, started in the 80s, that went through the 90s, the 2000s, and still a personality that you see and hear on your TV and radio today. So we're going to get to our interview with Paul, again, from Hashtag Sports, talking about Bill Polian. So make sure you watch that. Thank you again for joining me, and enjoy the interview. And we're here with Paul from Hashtag Sports. Paul, thank you for joining me. How are you doing this evening?
Hey, what's going on, Joe? Hey, you know what? I love to talk football, and the person we're going to talk about falls within my realm of relevance. Anything that happened longer than 20 years ago is not relevant to me anymore, with exception to Bill Polian. Anything that man touches is gold to me, so I'll talk about Bill Polian all day long.
Well, we'll talk about some of the things they touched that turned into gold, some maybe not so much. But first, what I want to ask, honestly, and if you're a Bills fan and you're watching this, so when I first started this Hall of Fame series, I reached out to Paul and Mara of Hashtag Sports, and I said, pick a Hall of Famer. What Hall of Famer do you want to talk about? Because obviously, if you've watched both of our channels, we know that we have an ongoing relationship, just going back and forth. So, and Paul comes back to me and says, Bill Polian. So ever since that day, Paul, why is Bill Polian your favorite Buffalo Bills Hall of Famer?
So Polian did a lot of really awesome things throughout his career, and it wasn't just his time with the Bills, but really his time in the NFL, and even now, you know, as an analyst, he's just such a great football mind. And even I've grown a lot of respect for Polian recently, because even as the game has evolved and changed, even being out of it, he still moves with the game. Like, he'll even say, you know, in 94, this is what we would have done. Never would have thought about that in 2006 because the game was different then. And this is why it changed in 2010. And this is where it was in 2015. He's such a great ambassador to the way that the game evolves. And the things that he did, we can look back on now. And Polian gets a lot of credit for the great things that he did in Buffalo. There's also things he gets credit for that he was associated with, but didn't have a lot of hands in. And then there's things that he was paramount in that we don't even talk about.
Sure.
So he's just such a great football figurehead. And I love Bill Polian, and he's made great errors, and he's got great success stories, and I'll be happy to talk about all of them.
Awesome. And that's where we're going to start this episode off. You just talked about some of the things that Bill Polian was a huge part of when it came to the Buffalo Bills organization that he does not get the credit for. What do you think is one of the biggest things that would top that list for you?
So things that he did that he didn't get credit for?
Correct.
Okay, so from 1989 to 1993, there was no collective bargaining agreement. So there had been a collective bargaining agreement agreed to in 1987, which was supposed to add free agency, but it was really nonsense, right? So teams could protect their top 37 players. They would get compensation if they signed somewhere else. Anybody outside that top 37 could sign with any team that they wanted. That's not exactly a fair system. And the law agreed with them when that collective bargaining agreement was overturned. The Players Association decertified the union, right? So there was no collective bargaining agreement till really 1993. And Polian was a big proponent of getting that in there, kind of helping the idea of the salary cap, structuring around the franchise tag concept, because these were all brand new things, figuring out a way to make free agency work for everybody across the board. And there are also some really cool things in there that Polian thought of throughout the course of designing the salary cap, and one of them was soft money. And this is something that we don't ever talk about, but it's such a big thing. A lot of fans will always talk about, well, they take team-friendly deals, sure, right? But there's a way to give a player money that's not really associated with the salary cap, and Polian was really smart to call that out. So soft money is like, I'll give you an example, right? Let's say I'm going to make your salary $10 million. $1 million of it, I'm going to donate to charity in your name. No, can't do that, right? Because you could write that off as a charitable donation, lowers your lowers the amount of taxes you pay, right? So there was, and just a sidestep real quick, you go ahead and tell me that the Patriots haven't promised Tom Brady, $8 million a year as a consultant till he's dead. Go ahead, you tell me that doesn't exist.
I know you're waiting for it. Yep.
But the truth is, soft money was a major player with trying to figure out how to bypass the salary cap, and Polian was real quick to say, listen, this is dark money. You got to get this out of football. If we're going to have a salary cap, you can't have this stuff. It's one of the reasons why contracts are written the way they are now is because of him.
Yeah, no, if you are someone who's watching this who love the analytics of football, you should definitely go back to like the first CBA agreements and just look how far we've come. Or if you don't like analytics and you're having trouble sleeping, just look at the CBAs and just start reading them. And the strides that we have taken, or the NFL has taken from where it began to basically the mid 80s is when it really began to today is unreal. And Bill Polian, who's been a part of the NFL pretty much the whole time, has been a big part of that. And I think you're right. He does not get the credit he deserves when it comes to those labor negotiations that you talk about.
I think Polian's an interesting figure, not just in Buffalo, but as in the NFL as a whole, because he was a really great middle point between understanding the dynamic of what ownership wanted and still advocating for the players. Right. So a lot of general managers will just have the side of the owner, right? That's their boss. They're going to be in their pocket. Polian really didn't see business that way. He looked at this as this is an organization that has many moving parts. If I upset the apple cart on either side, we have a big problem on our hands. So we need to make sure the players are in a situation where they're happy, and we need to make sure the ownership remains successful. How do we balance that? It's a really tough job.
Yeah, no, I agree. So the next question I would have for you then is, we talked about a success he doesn't get credit for. What's a success that you feel he gets credit for that he does not deserve?
Okay. So this is going to sound a little strange. I think that he gets credit for bringing Jim Kelly on. And now, he wasn't the general manager when Kelly was drafted, right? Actually, his paths barely crossed with Kelly through the USFL, right? So that's where a lot of things for Buffalo really happened, right? So there's a lot of things that happen through the USFL that impact the Bills when Polian, becomes the general manager, even when he was the pro scouting director, but ultimately when he becomes the general manager, that were, tentacles from his time in the USFL.
Yeah.
The Jim Kelly thing, I know he was important in bringing Jim Kelly over from the league, but the fact is the league had folded when Kelly came over, right? So Kelly was at that point already property of the Buffalo Bills.
Right.
So it was you sign this, you show up or you cannot play. We will not trade you. You cannot play. So I think Polian gets a little bit more credit. Yes, Kelly does show up for Buffalo, and of course we all know how that plays out. But Polian wasn't here when he was drafted, and he was really playing with a loaded gun because the Bills had Kelly's rights. He either had to show up or they had to trade him, and they had no intentions on trading. They held on to his rights for a couple of years at that point. They were not going to move on from him.
Yeah, it was kind of like a Barry Sanders situation, except for Barry Sanders was sick and tired of losing, so he didn't want to sign with the Lions worth anything. You can't blame him. Jim Kelly was a 23-year-old guy who just got done winning the CSFL title, where I think he was the MVP that year, so he was ready to play football. And so you have that leverage of saying, hey, you either play with us or you don't play. Period. So to give you can give Bill Polian a lot of praise for bringing Bruce Smith along.
And that's a big one.
Kelly. Obviously Bruce Smith is a huge success story, but Jim Kelly. I think that was the loaded gun that the Buffalo Bills had. It could have been Bill Polian in there. It didn't matter who was in there. Would have turned out the same way. So do you think that the Buffalo Bills moved hastily in 1992 when they fired Bill Polian?
So we see this in college football, right? And we'll use Charlie Weiss as a great example. So Charlie Weiss takes over at Notre Dame. I know a university close to your heart, right?
Yep.
And what happens when Charlie Weiss takes over at Notre Dame? Do you remember? I do. Okay, so educate the folk a little bit about Charlie Weiss's time, the first 2 years at Notre Dame.
Well, so, and I don't think it's just Charlie Weiss's time. For people who don't know, first of all, right before Charlie Weiss, I think this is succession, we had Ty Willingham, right? And he was a great head coach for Notre Dame. I still, to this day, I was a lot younger back then, so I'd have to look into it. I have no idea why we got rid of Ty Willingham. But then we bring in Charlie Weiss, and everyone's excited because of the success that Charlie Weiss had in New England with Tom Brady, because it's so hard to run that offense. But anyway, he comes to Notre Dame, and within 2 minutes, this is a bad idea. I mean, he comes in, and from the moment he came in, just a downward spiral. And I had anything to do with that. Notre Dame paid Charlie Weiss to be their head coach for 6 years after they let Charlie Weiss go. Just to point out, Notre Dame signed him to this huge contract, and it just, in 2 years. In 2 years, he was gone. I mean, he did worse than Chip Kelly did for the Eagles.
Yep. Paid him $19 million to go away. Yeah, that's what happened.
Exactly.
But you can't say that there wasn't immediate success, right? What'd they go? I think they 9-2 the first season under Weiss. And as the seasons wore on, you could see that this was not something that was going to be sustainable, right? He was not going to be able to continue to live off the success of somebody else. And I think that's what happened with the Bills, right? So Polian gets fired, and then the Bills go back to the Super Bowl the next year, right? Well, that's because the foundation was all still there, right? This wasn't a Brandon Beane scenario where they went ahead and pulled everything, ripped the organization to shreds to rebuild it. They felt that Polian wasn't, they felt that, what's the best way for me to phrase this? That team was very undisciplined. Okay, off the field, the Bills were having a lot of disciplinary issues off the field. They didn't feel Polian had the teeth in order to handle that. right? And that was one of the reasons why you also saw the coaching staff of, vast majority of the coaching staff get let go, because players were running all over the place. So they were going to multiple Super Bowls. They're at round 3 of this, and they don't care if they're in their hotels at 11 o'clock at night. They're out partying all night long. So there was a lot of disciplinary issues at the time. Do I think it was hasty? Absolutely. I mean, you go ahead and look at Bill Polian's career, and you tell me whether it was hasty, right? Anywhere he went, there was success. Anywhere. Of course it was hasty.
Yeah, even 3-4 years later, when the Buffalo Bills, Ralph Wilson fires Marv Levy, there's still some talks as to the connection between that happening in '92 and Marv Levy not being fired, but being fired in '95. I mean, I don't want to spread any rumors here on Believers Talk, but I'm just saying it happened that way.
Marv's an interesting case study in relationships, right? Because Polian and Marv were together in Kansas City from 78 to 82, right? Marv was the head coach. Marv leaves and ends up where? He ends up in the USFL, right? And that's honestly where Polian ends up. I think in '83 it was. He was with Chicago, the Chicago Blitz, if my memory serves me correct.
I'll believe you.
But before that, he was also in the CFL where he won a Grey Cup. Like everything Polian did turned to gold. But that relationship in Kansas City when he was a pro scout, when Marv was the head coach, Polian comes in as the pro personnel director for the Bills in '84. And Marv is right there, right there. And you have to believe that relationship of the two of them, that was similar to the situation we saw with McDermott and Brandon Beane, right? Where it was, hey, listen, I've got a guy you got to get, right? This is somebody that I can work with directly. We have great communication. We are on the same page. This isn't a package deal, but I'm telling you, you want to buy this, right? And I think, that's one thing that I don't think Polian gets a lot of credit for, is maintaining that relationship with Marv through the travels, because they were both gone in '82, and then they didn't reappear with Buffalo until a few years later. And they had multiple stops along the way. And that's something I don't think Polian gets enough credit for, is maintaining that professional relationship with Marv. And and allowing Marv to lay the legacy that he laid as the Bills head coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of segued into my next question. I was going to ask you about the similarities that you see between Bill Polian and what we see so far out of our new GM Brandon Beane. Like, what are the similarities there? And you can even talk about a little bit more about the similarities between the relationship between GM and head coach, like we had back then and like we have right now.
Yeah. So I want to parlay back to something that you had said earlier, right? You said that you had mentioned Bruce Smith as being like the hallmark Bill Polian move, and I agree with you, right? That was honestly one of the reasons he became general manager was the ushering in of Bruce Smith in Buffalo. Side note, quick question: do you think Bruce Smith would have been as dominant early in his career had Bill Polian not pulled the moves for Cornelius Bennett?
Well,
I asked that because I think it's a tough question, right? I think it's a really tough question, but it's very Polian-esque. So Polian's at the root of it, right? You look at this great talent, Bruce Smith, and you say, you know what? I'm not done yet. And you really, at the time, that was a big move for Cornelius Bennett.
Absolutely. So I'll take this maybe even a step further. If Bruce Smith was still allowed playing time on the field, then yes, I think Bruce Smith is still that big of an impact. However, the first year of Bruce Smith's career, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, the second year, he got suspended by the league for 3 games for a drug-related issue. So
that sounds right.
Yeah, huh?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So I honestly don't know if Bill Polian's not there to vouch for Bruce Smith if he doesn't get the same amount of playing time as he did with Bill Polian there. That's. But if Bruce Smith is on the field, yeah, Bruce Smith is that dominant that he gets recognized no matter what.
Well, I think some of the reason that I bring that up, right, is because you take a look at the moves that Brandon Beane has pulled, and Beane is not afraid to make his team better. I think that's something that a lot of general managers will get sort of risk averse, right?
Mm-hmm.
They say, well, let's take the best player we can get where we are.
Yeah.
And this was the first draft where we've really seen Brandon Beane say, well, this is where we are, so we're just going to have to make this work, right? And trading future assets, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to make your team better.
Yeah.
That, and when you take a look at an athlete like Cornelius Bennett was, and then you take a look at the athlete that Tremaine Edmonds is, you see a lot of similarities there. You say, this is a next level apex predator athlete. I need to have him on my football team because I can do something with that, right? It may be raw, but I can do something with that. And I think that's just the very start of the comparison between Polian and Beane is they're not risk averse. They're not afraid to take a risk to make their team better. With that, with that being said, I think it's also important to make sure that we call out the fact that Polian was like a running back whisperer, like how Doug Whaley was with linebackers. And I will not praise Doug Whaley for a lot of things, but he knew a linebacker when he saw one, right? If you go ahead and take a look at Polian's history, right? He passes on Ricky Williams and gets Edgerrin James, and instantaneously the Colts are a 10-win better team the next season, right? And then you take a look at that season where he traded picks away for Cornelius Bennett. The Bills don't have a first-round pick, and they grabbed Thurman in the second, right? He had no problems finding running backs. And you go up and down the history of Bills while he was here, most of those running backs, you'll go, oh, yeah, I remember him. They're memorable players. He did a lot of things really, really well. And Brandon Beane seems to do the same, right? Finding value at that running back position. I think there's a lot of similarities here. And the one most recent piece is the Deion Dawkins extension, right?
Talk about that, absolutely.
That's the first time we're actually seeing whether Beane's intention is to build a nucleus of players and try and keep them together like the Seattle Seahawks have done, more recently. Try to build a nucleus of young players through the draft and re-sign them and keep them as long as you can. Or our draft picks just turn and burn. You're going to pick up your veterans at free agency. We're just going to continue to draft, and turn and burn those picks on 4-year deals. The Deion Dawkins signing is the first real flag that says, hey, we're going to retain talent. If we draft talent, we're going to retain talent. And Polian was outstanding at that. If you take a look at at the players that he sought value in, he drafted, and those players stayed throughout a majority of their career. Jeff Saturday is a perfect example when he's in Indianapolis. Even Kent Hall, right, who Polian brought over from the USFL. That was a huge signing. It was a franchise-changing signing by dragging Kent Hall into Buffalo from a defunct franchise and from a defunct league. And that's another thing. I don't know if he gets the credit for that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, but he's been part of a few leagues that went debunked there. So
that is true.
Yeah, we can talk about that too. But yeah, after his time in Buffalo, we'll go through the rest of his Hall of Fame career. He is the Carolina Panthers GM. You can probably speak more about that. Now, was he the first Carolina Panthers GM? I believe.
Yeah. So I have a funny story about this.
Okay.
So
sure.
It was 1994. I was 12.
Okay.
And I'm standing inside I believe it was Jubilee Supermarket, which was a small supermarket chain in Buffalo. It used to be Super Duper, transitioned to Jubilee for those of you keeping score at home. And Frank Reich had his own television show. When your backup quarterback has his own television show, that tells you the level of popularity of the backup quarterback.
That's right.
And he was coming into free agency. The next year was his first year that he was going to be a free agent. Again, it was kind of this time period where free agency was now a thing because of the collective bargaining agreement in 93, which we just talked about. So I got in line and I got to ask Frank Reich a question. And my question was, since Bill Polian is now the general manager of the Carolina Panthers, do you see yourself leaving Buffalo to sign in Carolina? And he gave me some, fluffy, I love Buffalo, this is my home, blah, blah, blah. Ipso facto, Frank Reich signs with Carolina Panthers in 1995. But I mean, He was the first GM, yes. He was also the quickest to get a team to a Super Bowl and win it in NFL history.
Yeah, he took the Panthers to the Super Bowl the second year. So
2 years. Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's crazy. That's absolutely
it's
insane.
Crazy.
In fact, so, and this is a fun fact for all you out there. So the Jaguars and Panthers both came into the league the same year. Both of them, their second year in existence, Jaguars won the AFC Championship game. Panthers won the NFC Championship game. There was a chance that two expansion teams were going to make it to the Super Bowl at the same time in just 2 years. It was pretty amazing. So, but yeah, Bill Polian's thanks to that. Obviously, then after that, he goes to Indianapolis Colts. There's a quarterback there. I forget his name. You might be able to refresh our memory, Paul.
Captain Forehead?
Yeah, right. Omaha.
Omaha. That's right, Omaha.
Yeah, obviously, he goes to Indianapolis, where he is the GM of the Indianapolis Colts while Peyton Manning is there. He does something that no other Buffalo Bills Hall of Famer can say, and he gets himself a Super Bowl ring when the Colts beat the Bears. Rex Grossman's Bears, I think it was.
Yes, that is right.
So that's what are some of your memories post Buffalo Bills of Bill Polian? Something that you want to talk about?
So Polian was talking about, because he's on NFL radio rather often, right? And Polian was talking about how teams handle the NFL draft, right?
Yeah.
And this was something I didn't know. And again, just something that's so second nature to him that really, when you sit back and think about it, is really pivotal information to know. And I say this all the time on hashtag, just constant. Most teams have 12 to 15 players graded as true first-round players.
Yeah.
After that, there's 32 picks in the first round. Okay, sometimes 31, depending on if the NFL took the Patriots pick away. But usually there's 32 picks in the first round. And most teams only have 15, maybe 18 players graded as first-round picks. That's why once you get outside that top 20, you see picks start going like crazy. And the reason that is because a team will look and say, all our first-round players are gone.
Yeah.
What are we doing here, right? Are we going to get 1A? We're going to get 1B? Or are we going to take value now and start looking at, players that we like further down the board? So just that little nugget of wisdom is so important to understand the draft process, because when you see a team jump up to pick 21 from, the second round, and you look at what they gave up, you're like, man, they gave up a lot. Well, that might have been their last first round player. And they said, we can't let this player slide anymore. It's really fascinating how that works. And just kind of Polian's, knowledge there and just education to people on how that works. It was just so easy for him to say that. And I was sitting in my car going, oh my God, that makes so much sense. I was dumbfounded. But then you get Polian, that's great Bill Polian. Then you get like AAF Bill Polian, where he jumps in, March 2018 to, help create this football league that can't even, like, nobody could afford it, right? Trent Richardson's out there and he's your marquee player, and it was just a disaster. It was cool how they did how they broadcast AAF. I thought that was cool, where you got to be in the replay booth, right? There were some different camera angles. You could hear the players like almost the whole time. You could hear the offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators. So it was cool how they let the fan in. Yeah. But there were like 8 people in the stands. Like, there was just no interest at all. No interest. And,
well, in fairness, the NFL can take some pointers since there won't be any fans in the stands this year. So.
Touche.
I mean, hey, Bill Polian has some tips for you, NFL.
No kidding.
But no, I mean, listen, Bill Polian, I know that, for a lot of Bills fans or fans of the NFL out there, it's not the name that people recognize. He's not a player unless you Google search him. Then he comes up as an NFL player. I think he played in his career, but that's not what people remember him for. But Bill Polian, definitely a big part of the NFL, the Buffalo Bills, and the NFL as a whole throughout his whole NFL career. So yeah. So Paul, thanks a lot for joining me, talking to me about Bill Polian.
Yeah, anytime, Joe. Always love coming on your channel.
Yeah, guys, and if you're not already a member of Hashtag Nation, guys, I've been a member of Hashtag Nation since the beginning. I mean, if it's not Mario and Paul, if it's not myself at Believers Talk, I don't know where you guys are getting your information from. But thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Believers Talk. Again, guys, check out either Paul and Mario at Hashtag Sports or myself on Believers Talk as the season approaches. Live play-by-play. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll get out the schedule when we have it. It's just going to be a good time. We had a great time last year. We're going to do it again this year. So, again, thank you for joining me, Paul. His information is going to be in the description box below. So, again, if you haven't subscribed to Hashtag Sports, be sure to do that. We will talk to you all soon. Until we do, go Bills. Again, we want to thank Paul from Hashtag Sports. And if you are not already subscribed to Hashtag Sports, go down to the description box. Make sure you check out Hashtag Sports and hit that subscribe button. You won't regret it. Great content over there by Mario and Paul. They always do a great job. But again, we thank him for breaking down why Bill Polian is his favorite Buffalo Bills Hall of Famer and what he admires about Bill Polian. There's plenty of things to admire about Bill Polian. We talked about them a little bit in this video. But guys, that's all we're going to do for this video. Let me know in the comment section what you think, what you learned maybe about Bill Polian. Again, this is kind of a unique situation, right? Again, this is not player. This is just someone who contributed his time as GM mostly in the NFL. He was head player of player personnel for a little bit as well. Definitely many roles that Bill Polian has played in his career in the NFL and again in other leagues that he was a part of as well. So again, thank you guys for joining me on this Hall of Fame edition of Believers Talk. Like I said, leave a comment in the comment section, like this video, let me know what you think. I look forward to talking to you all soon. Until I do, go Bills.